Hi everybody, it's Brittany. Um, so I want to thank you guys for being so patient with me for waiting for these new videos to be uploaded. As I kind of mentioned on the page, my sister passed away in September, so I kind of took a break for a while. Um, she had leukemia and she got sick and she just couldn't recover from the leukemia or from the sickness with the leukemia. Um, I'd like to thank everybody who said sent their love and support. I really appreciate it. Um, with all the events that have happened, it kind of made me think about some things that had not really been addressed and I don't see addressed too often. And I actually had a hard time finding research on, which is talking to your child who has autism about grief and loss and death. Um, what I've done is essentially applied the same behavioral principles that I've learned throughout my coursework to working with a child on grief. And I've also taken from different resources like Autism Speaks. They had some good resources about dealing with grief. And one of my favorites for children with autism and for typically developing kids was Sesame Street and Fred Rogers. So I've kind of added those in today because I feel like a lot of the things that are mentioned in all those can be applied no matter the developmental uh, disability that your child has, if they have a developmental disability. Um, so let's see if we can get this going for you guys today. So talking to your child about grief, loss, and death. I put all those on there because children, you can grieve even if somebody hasn't died. You grieve when you move and your friends live somewhere else. Children can grieve for different things. Unfortunately, with some of the current events happening, we see children taken away from their families due to criminal behavior or drug addiction or other political reasons that this is not the correct forum to talk about in. Um, so that's why I incorporated all of that, because you don't need to lose somebody to death to grieve. So your grief is going to be different than your child's. I incorporated this because you may or may not know the physiological or emotional symptoms that accompany grief, because there were things that I experienced that I didn't realize were a part of my grief. So most of us have heard of the grieving cycle, the denial, anger, depression, bargaining, and acceptance, and all those. So there's a good chance that you're going to ride that emotional roller coaster throughout throughout this process. I personally haven't experienced it as a circular process. As a joke, I told a friend of mine it was more like a squiggly, bouncing all over pinball machine game. So if you don't feel, if you're not grieving in that typical, or what they say is the circular pattern of the grief cycle, that's normal. Don't worry about that. Some other things that you could experience, loss of appetite, trouble sleeping. And my personal experience, I experienced a lot of shaking, weakness in my legs, and dry mouth. Um, it was like I couldn't quench my thirst. I was constantly drinking. Um, and I actually looked it up, and those are physiological effects of grief and stress. So it made a little bit more sense. So I put on here, do you show your grief to your child? Yes. Um, you don't want to hide that from your child, because when if you have a typical developing child, you're going to be their model. They want to know, take from you the social cues to know what is appropriate grieving behavior, I guess, if you want to think of it like that. But even with children with autism, it's okay to show that grief. That way they can observe your feelings, and then you can talk about that. You can connect, like, well, mommy is crying because she's sad. Why is mommy sad? Because this happened. So while a child with autism may not be able to, go from mommy's crying because Aunt Leah died, they could go from, okay, so I see mommy's crying. What does that mean? And then you can explain to them and help them understand the different emotions and why you might feel that way. Um, it might be a little difficult, but if your child, like mine, asks a lot of questions, or my nephews who ask a lot of questions, um, I think it's okay. Yeah, it's okay to talk to them about it. More of a child who has limited verbal skills, you can still talk with them about them. I would always say you want to talk more to your children anyway, regardless of if they're speaking or not. Just use less words, be more direct, and it might be hard because they're concepts that are not concrete. So just expect some confusion when you talk about that with emotions. So to go right into that, talking with your child, the first thing I put on here is use literal language. I actually got this straight from Autism Speaks. And the reason why you want to do that is it can be confusing using those idioms or those turn of phrase like passed away or things like that, because it doesn't quite make that sense to a child. One I would really highly recommend steering clear of is telling them that they've gone to sleep forever. And the reason I say this is because it could terrify the child. It could cause issues with them sleeping because they're afraid to go to sleep, because what if they never wake up? Or they're afraid if you go to sleep, you'll never wake up. So I would be very, very careful about your use of words, especially with a child with autism. Make sure you're finding the exact words that you want to use and that need to be used to express the idea. Finding a balance of information. I really didn't think about this one before, but it was mentioned to me by one of my professors when I talked to her about what do I tell my nephews? What do I tell my son about my sister? And you want to find that balance, because I know my son gets stuck on ideas and my nephews get stuck on certain things. So if you give them too much information, they may dwell on it. And that could be the same with not enough information. If you don't give them enough information, they may dwell on the uncertainty of things. So it's going to be difficult to find that balance. But if you need help, you can always ask a professional. Maybe they can help steer you in the right direction of what should I say, what shouldn't I say. And I put on here, there is such a thing as too much information. You don't want to give them so much detail that they recall everything, and sometimes it can come up in inappropriate settings. So just beware of that. Um, your if your child is verbal and high functioning, there might come a time where and this could be for children as well that are not autistic, there might come a time where they ask some tough questions. Um, so I put on here, it's okay to say you don't know. Um, because honestly, we don't know. And giving them false hope or bad information could make things worse. So just be prepared for that. And like I said, it's okay to say, I don't know. Or say, I wish I knew why. Or I wish I could answer your questions. Because I had to say that a lot to my nephew because we didn't know and I didn't want to lie to him. One big thing on here that I think that is very important for a child, especially if they're like my nephew and my son who get stuck on schedules. They have to have their routine in place. Is to prepare them and prepare yourself because their schedule could change. They're going to see a lot of different people that either they know that or maybe they're new people. So there's going to be a lot of people coming in and out, dropping off. Sometimes they drop off food. So they might be eating things they're not used to eating. And yeah, it's a huge change. I mean, you just have to do your best to prepare them for that schedule change and for seeing people a lot, and then all of a sudden it stops. You stop seeing all these people. So that can be a bit of a change as well. So do what you can to prepare your child for that. I would also, if you can't prepare them for what a service might look like, my sister was, she had a viewing and then she was cremated. So it was really hard to see her that way and for her boys to see her. And it was kind of hard to explain to them why they could see mommy but she couldn't do anything. So again, those tough questions might come up there as to why is mommy where she's at or why is whoever where they're at. And again, like I said, this doesn't have to necessarily be death. I'm just using it death because this is my personal experience. So it might be hard on the child to see the person that they loved in that situation, whether it is at a funeral home or if it's where they're incarcerated and they see them in that manner, or if it's supervised visits or just not being able to see them at all. Just do what you can to prepare them for that. Also, it might be good to explain to a child what it means to be buried or cremated. Now, I say this with the caveat that you need to be careful on the amount of detail you give. So I would not, this is my personal opinion. What I told my family, my nephews, and my son was that my sister had been turned to ashes, and it's telling the truth, but it's omitting some things that they didn't need to know the details of. So finding that balance is kind of hard. So just be prepared for that. I know I say I'm prepared a lot because it's really, this is a challenge. This is going to be a challenge because you're grieving and your child is grieving as well, even if you don't see that grief. And when it comes to that, let them know that it's okay to feel however they want to feel. They can, if they feel angry, that's okay. Because I know I feel angry. If they feel sad, that's okay too. If they feel scared or confused, let them know that all those feelings are okay. But you will be there for them to help them get through it. And that eventually the pain will lessen. And it may not go away forever, but it'll get easier. So just things to think about. And one thing I also put on here, this is just strictly for some people. I am not a spiritual person. So certain aspects of that was dealing with it was difficult for me. So what I've put on here is you have to decide what you want to share spiritually with your child, if that's something you want to share with them. Just be prepared for those hard questions, and also for that not understanding, the confusion, because spirituality, again, is not one of those concrete ideas. It's very abstract. It's very hard for children to grasp. So you may have some questions that are hard to answer. So when it comes to the spiritual aspect of loss and grieving, my recommendation is to talk with your leader, or your church leader, or wherever, your chapel, your synagogue, whatever it is you go to, and ask for their advice. That might be the best way to do it. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm all stuffy today. And things to remember. Your child may not grieve the same way you do. So, especially with children with autism, I've noticed that some kids can tell you a horrific story about a loss of a pet and not show a shred of emotion. That doesn't mean they're not feeling emotions. It just means that they don't understand the emotions, or they don't know how to express these emotions. So my puppies are freaking out. I think the mail came. Death, again, is not an easy concept. So they may not understand when you tell them that somebody died, especially when going to a service. That was really hard for my son to grasp, because he could see his Aunt Leah, but he wasn't understanding why she couldn't get up. So it's really hard. I mean, even for adults, it's hard to grasp. So just know that if you're confused, your child's confused as well. Your child may also show signs of stress and anxiety in different ways. Like they may come up to you and say their stomach hurts, or they're having bad dreams, or you may see it in behavioral changes. And that could be anything from acting out in class to acting, at home. It could be they are being more isolated from everybody. It could be that they are being more clingy to other people. So you could see some behavioral changes in your child, or even in yourself. So just be prepared for that. Again, sorry, that preparation word. And my final point on here again is grief doesn't have to be for a death. Again, we see where parents are being incarcerated due to different things, and our current events show that there is a huge the opioid addiction, and parents are being incarcerated for that, or their children are being taken away from their parents due to an unsafe condition. And so you could still see the same symptoms of grief in those children, even if they haven't experienced a death. So just be prepared, and if this is more something that you're seeing, then it's okay to, again, to go through that same process with the child. So what can you do to help your child? Sorry, let me move my picture so you can actually read my slide. Oop. So talk to them. Tell them that it's okay to feel the way they do. Tell them that they could talk to you about the person. You can share memories if the child is old enough to have them or verbal enough to remember them. You can memorialize the person. Like, I have a shadow box of my sister upstairs. My family has my sister's remains in a beautiful urn, and they have a plaque with her picture on it, so that they memorialized her that way. We also did a balloon release where we got to write a letter to her or something we always wanted to say to her, and then we released the balloons. That was really helpful to a lot of people. And you can have your child express their emotions in different ways. Sesame Street, talked about having your child draw pictures or color or find an artistic way to express what you're feeling. Keep the people around you informed. Your child's teachers, their therapists, their anybody that's involved in your child's life. Try your best to let them know what's going on with your child and what they could see, and what you've been seeing at home. That way you guys can work out a plan together as a team. And it's going to be hard, but find a new routine. I didn't want to say new normal because it's just, I don't know, it just didn't seem right. But find a new routine. So if it's a close member who's died or who has been incarcerated, try to find a new routine for your weekends or just your day-to-day life. Like, it will help get them back on track and help your child move through the grief process. And the last thing, I kind of put it in the middle, but last thing I'll cover on this page is seek help from a professional or professionals. It is never a bad decision to seek counseling for yourself or for your child when a loss has occurred. They can help you understand what's going on. They can help you understand what's going on with your child. They can help you find different ways to express those feelings, to talk about those feelings. I know I've been in counseling before, and I was warned that after the first day, you'll actually probably feel worse than you did before going in, but slowly it'll get better. And for a child, you may see those behavior changes again. You could also talk to, if your child is an ABA, talk to their BCBA and see what you guys can do to help with the challenging behaviors that you might be seeing due to their grief. Some of it may just have to run its course, because when you stop a behavior like this, you can cause a new behavior to pop up. So just be careful is all I'll say. It's just be careful with that. Choose your battles, and just seek professional help before you try to put a particular behavior on extinction or a punishment behavior or anything like that. So I included resources instead of references this time, but I did actually pull from all of these for these slides. There is stuff about autism specific, and then there's just children specific and dealing with with loss with your child. I really like the Fred Rogers information, and I go to Sesame Street a lot for assistance with working with children. So I really recommend those. Um, let's see. And yeah, the Autism Speaks one is a blog, but it's still pretty good and has some good information. Um, so again, guys, thank you so much for watching. I know today's topic was a lot more somber, um, and not something that's super easy to talk about. Um, but I really appreciate you guys tuning in and watching. If there's something in this topic that you feel that I should have covered or should have covered differently, let me know. Um, and I will do what I can to correct it. I really, again, appreciate everything. Thank you guys for all the thoughts and the support through this time. And hopefully I will be able to get back to a routine of my own. So thank you guys and have a good day. Goodbye.